Milim, like Chloe, instinctively knew this. Milim was currently clad in jet black armor. A beautiful crimson horn sprouted from her forehead, revealing her true form as a dragonoid. However, they had not summoned any heavenly demons or asuras. They were fighting with their bare hands. If Milim was in serious mode, she could easily defeat a normal opponent. However, Ivalage was not an easy opponent to subdue with just her fists. No, on the contrary. Why didn't Milim draw her sword? Chloe wondered about this, but somehow she guessed the reason. Because Ivalage is too creepy, he said. Ivalage's growth rate was so abnormal that it was unclear whether it could be destroyed even with the use of heavenly demon Asura, or so Milim had judged. That wasn't all. That thing looks similar to me. It's likely that it has stolen my mother's body. Because he had sensed this, he hesitated to point his sword at him. However, this was no longer the time to say such things. There's no other way. From here on, I'm getting serious. Milim said this as she summoned heavenly demon Asura and prepared to attack. Seeing this, Ivarage was delighted. A different game. Kaihaha, I'm looking forward to it. Laughing, Ivarage thought for a moment, and then took out something. It was a beautiful rapier. It is a white-bladed sword that emits a divine light, and is sized just right for a woman to hold. Genesis class is kindness, karma. That was the name of the sword. Milim braced herself. The aura emitted by the sword was equal to that of his own, heavenly demon Asura. In other words, the advantage of weapons was lost. Chloe asked Milim, "Are you okay? I think it will only be a diversion, but should I help out?" Milim refuses. "No, there's no need. You just follow the plan and see it through to the end." That was the initial plan we agreed upon. Stopping time is a waste, so there is no need for it at all. The story was concluded by stating that Chloe's trump card, the power to recall memories of the future, time leap, would not be activated until she had seen the end. Even though Chloe prioritizes efficiency, she agrees with that policy. For Chloe, who had been through the cycle of time for what seemed like eternity, the time it took to witness Milim's complete defeat was not painful. So, at the moment, Chloe was nothing more than a mere witness. However, Chloe had been completely exhausted from fighting Milim in her stampede state, so she was also trying to regain her energy in this situation. Knowing this, Milim had also turned down Chloe's offer. And so, the beautiful woman and the beautiful girl, their hair in cherry blossom, gold and platinum pink, faced each other with their swords drawn. The first move is Milim. He slashed at Ivarage with the intention of killing him with a swift blow. Unable to cope with this, a large wound opened up from Ivalage's right shoulder to his left side. What gushed out was not blood but darkness. A thick magical element became so dark that it filled his entire field of vision, gushing out like blood. However, it subsided within a second. The magical energy was absorbed into the wound, and everything returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. "Kaihaha, is this what pain feels like?" Ivarage asked, appearing to feel no pain at all. Since she had no obligation to respond, Milim ignored it and prepared for a series of attacks. Milim's swordsmanship is self-taught, but her outstanding combat sense allows her to surpass even the most elite swordsmen in skill and level. Even in a battle of pure swordsmanship, he surpassed King Gazelle and Hinata, and was even able to fight on equal terms with Hakuryu. However, this style is hard sword, rather than gently deflecting the opponent's sword. It is a sword technique that powerfully deflects it, disrupting their stance and crushing them. Aburo also have strong sword techniques, but Milim's fighting style seems to have specialized in them. On the other hand, Ivalage is, of course, an amateur. Everything he sees and hears is new, and he is enjoying battling Milim. Even with the blow he had just received, he felt neither surprise nor fear. He was simply interested, and even enjoyed observing his own injuries. The reason is simple. Since he didn't even know the concept of death, there was no reason for him to feel fear. Before that, Ivarage had thought that this level of damage was no more than a mosquito bite. And it's tough. It seems so. Milim complained with a grim expression, and Chloe nodded vigorously. We have no choice but to acknowledge that it would be difficult to deal with. Ivalage, who is clearly an abnormal being, using normal methods. However, Milim's authority, ultimate ability, ultimate skill, wrathful king, Satanale, is difficult to operate safely, so activating it would mean going out of control. Strictly speaking, it was constantly being strengthened, but compared to using the power at full power, the effect was insignificant. There's no doubt that Milim is one of the top figures in this world. However, he was clearly at a disadvantage against Ivalage. The sword continues. The two men exchange fierce swords for a while. Milim was increasingly at a disadvantage. I can't believe it. This guy is getting stronger and stronger. It's no wonder Milim was shocked. Unlike when Milim used Stampede, Ivalage's basic power did not increase. The sheer amount of energy was so overwhelming that there was no need for that. Ivalage adjusted his power to suit Milim. It seems that he thinks that even that is just a game. Understanding this, Milim also became anxious. As a result, the sword was deflected. Kyaha. Ivalage swung down kindness karma at Milim, who was now bare-handed. It was a desperate situation, but Chloe stepped in. I won't let you. Chloe skillfully deflected Ivarage's sword. There was no resistance. It was Chloe who was caught off guard. Ivalage voluntarily let go of the sword. Chloe blocked the sword and threw it up. In contrast, Ivarage had both hands free, because she wasn't attached to the sword. And then the rush begins. Ivalage's left and right fists slammed into Chloe, who had an opening. Chloe was blown away, receiving damage that instantly took away her ability to fight. Damn, I can't believe it. It seems I was mistaken in thinking that losing your weapon means death on the battlefield. No, Chloe's thinking was not wrong. It's just that common sense didn't apply to Ivalage. When facing Ivalage, who is not bound by any particular fighting style, it is necessary to consider all possibilities. Unable to move, Chloe wondered whether to activate Time Leap. But at that moment, my eyes met Milim's. Milim had not given up yet. She jumped on Ivalage, who was closing in on Chloe. And once again, the fight became tangled. That's right, it's not a fatal injury yet. So I'll stick with you until the end. Chloe also changed her mind and used her sword to support herself as she stood up. Emma. Thanks to Milim, there are no Eidolon or cryptid reinforcements. The heroes are dealing with the remaining fighting forces. Even the weakest individuals are a fearsome army, equivalent to the Demon Lord. Seeds, but fortunately they are not cooperating at all. They have also been weakened by the benefits of the Holy Purification Barrier, Holy Field. So the battle situation is stable with tactics of defeating them one by one. Obra, an expert in fighting against the mythical beasts and cryptids, cooperated with Benimaru and provided him with information, which allowed for more refined tactics. Obra himself takes the lead in command, ignoring the exhaustion of his mental and physical strength. Thanks to that, it looked like they were on their way to victory. With Rumina's recovering, do you think we can win? No, we shouldn't let our guard down just yet. We've left the enemy's boss entirely to Milim Sama. Depending on the outcome, there's a risk that everything could be turned upside down. Sensing that she was gaining the upper hand, Hinata spoke up, but Benimaru rebuked her. In a battle, you never know what will happen until the very end. This is what Benimaru has engraved in his mind. Even if the situation is such that victory is certain, complacency can lead to carelessness. Hinata also agreed with this opinion. That's true. I guess I let my guard down when I heard about Rimuru's return. Feeling ashamed of myself, I pulled myself together once again. Even so, there were reports that they had succeeded in defeating the rulers of the cryptids. If they continued on this path and defeated the last enemy, it would be a victory for humanity. It was no wonder that Hinata breathed a sigh of relief. Like Hinata, the majority of people were filled with positive news. They were excited by this and motivated to end the war as it was. The Tensukyaku was shaken by the biggest shock of the day. Amidst the rising dust, a figure slowly steps out. Everyone tried to determine his true identity, but they instinctively knew. A terrible chill and a feeling of the worst. That turned out to be true. Kyaha. The first thing I saw was her cherry blossom gold, platinum pink hair, but it wasn't in twin tails. It was straight and spread out in the wind. The figure that looked like an adult Milim was the human form that the Destruction Death World Dragon Ryu, Ivarage, had obtained. As I thought, it didn't end smoothly. Hinata muttered. Ruminas, who had descended next to him, spat out in disgust. Milim is still alive, but she appears to be quite exhausted. That damage not. Even my magic can heal it, let alone her injuries. That's probably true, not only Hinata, but everyone who could grasp the situation. Thought so. Milim's energy was running low, and she was on the verge of fainting, so unless she was given some energy to replenish her, she would not be revived. The problem was that there was no way to replenish the energy of someone with as much magical power as Milim. In other words, Milim is currently withdrawing from the front lines. Furthermore, Chloe was nowhere to be seen, and it was unclear whether she was alive or dead. Then it's my turn. Veldora, who had defeated Keikashi, sensed a presence and returned to the east. Benimaru was full of confidence against Ivalage, who had defeated Milim, but he couldn't give permission. Please wait, Veldora-sama. If Milim-sama was defeated, I don't think she's an opponent worth challenging one-on-one. Isn't that cowardly? No, that's not true. If you win, it's justice. Benimaru stated decisively. He asserted. Yes, this is not a fight, it's a war. This is a battle that will determine the survival of humanity. If we lose, it's all over, so there's no time to be picky about our means. In order to make effective use of the time Milim had bought, the correct thing to do would be to attack all at once with the remaining forces. That's true, Veldora-sama. If there are casualties, Rimuru-sama will be saddened. Tensura also agreed with Benimaru's opinion. Rescuing Milim should be the priority, and then defeating Ivalage would be the end of it. That was Tensura's opinion. Hinata largely agreed. She had just sworn not to let her guard down and was wary of making any last-minute mistakes. Velgrind said, in the first place, I nearly died from a single blow from Ivalage. I don't think you can win if you go charging in alone, you idiot. Although Velgrind had recovered considerably by integrating the other separate, body, heart, body, and tie, she was still not at her best. As someone who had experienced firsthand how dangerous Ivalage was, her warning to her younger brother was harsh. At this point, Luminous also joins in. As for me, I think it would be good if Veldora suffered a painful experience. Well, losing a valuable fighting force would be a foolish plan, so I'll at least give you a word of advice to stop. He said, even more harshly than Velgrind. Veldora groaned at this, but he understood. I was a little worried that maybe I would lose. If that's the case, then we wouldn't mind everyone joining forces. Veldora summed it up cheerfully. Everyone nodded in agreement. Karian and the others who were listening to the conversation did not object. When you're up against a monster like that, there's no time to complain. That's right. First of all, if we don't win, there's no way forward. Leave Milim-sama's rescue to me. I'll help too. Karian and Frey gave their respective opinions in this manner. In response to this, Benimaru came up with a plan. As if in response to that, the battle to capture Ivalage, the destruction death. World Dragon was about to begin, but... Interlude, Second Coming. Dino and his group reached the sky above the battlefield and learned of Milim's defeat. Dino was on the verge of losing his temper, but he held himself back and tried to join Benimaru's command, but... At that moment, Feldway gave chase. Wait. What? Are you trying to get in the way? Hey, I'm busy here. Read the room. Dino and the others reacted coldly to Feldway. He didn't even try to hide his annoyance and looked displeased. But Feldway doesn't mind. Feldway's lack of consideration for other people's feelings and thoughts is both a weakness and a virtue. Answer the question. Do you think Veldanava-sama wanted this situation to happen? I believed that he loved this world. That's why I hoped that if any evil were directed at this world, he would be resurrected to stop it. Dino and the others were confused when Feldway suddenly started talking about himself. I want to move to rescue Milim, but they're a huge nuisance. For the time being, I've switched to network conversation using thought transmission. So I don't need to worry too much about the passage of time. However, even so, Dino and the others felt that their mood had been dampened, and that it was not necessary to talk about it now. Perhaps due to this dissatisfaction, Pico couldn't help but retort. If he hadn't been resurrected, what would you have done? Feldway responded to this question with a sigh. You haven't asked the crucial question yet, but I'll answer it first. Of course, I plan to reconstruct the world and build an ideal society that I would completely control. If he had left the management of the world to me from the beginning, such a tragedy would never have happened, says Feldway. Then he stated his conclusion. I plan to reset everything, create a utopia, and wait for that person. In a sense, it is an unwavering philosophy. This was as expected for Dino and the others, so there was nothing to say. Pico, who had intended to be sarcastic, was shocked to hear such an ideal that was close to delusion. I see. Pico reluctantly agreed, and Feldway resumed his solo performance as if the real action was about to begin. Let's get to the point of the question. Oh yeah. If Veldanava-sama had been revived, he would have tried to stop this situation. However, that is not the case. What do you all think is his intention, that this situation is exactly what he wanted, or is there some other reason? I don't know. I mean, I don't understand the point of bringing up the hypothetical question of what if Veldanava-sama had been revived. We finished that discussion while ago, right? It's as Pico said. We've concluded that the holy relics were eaten by Ivalage. Right. In fact, he has taken on the appearance of Lady Lucia right now, and Lord Veldanava's holy relics should be inside his stomach as well. Well, that's how it is. We have to rescue Milim and defeat Ivalage. Well, if we hold out until Rimuru-san arrives, he should be able to do something about the rest. You want to show him how hard you've worked until then and increase his popularity, right? Dino is quite shrewd. Shut up. You guys are on the brink of losing your jobs or staying safe for the rest of your lives, all because of my influence. You better cooperate. I know. Leave it to me. This time, Dino and the others were planning to end the conversation. However, Feldway persisted. This is no time to joke around. Listen, this is a serious question. If this is what Veldanava-sama wants for the situation to turn out like this. Then what do you intend to do? As the 7 angels of the origin created by him, what is the correct course of action for us? The question revealed Feldway's deep anguish. Dino and the others changed their attitude, realizing that he was listening. Seriously. At the same time, Dino thought, oh dear. You also suspected that Veldanava-sama had been revived, didn't you? So, are you still suspicious, Dino? Feldway looked convinced. Feldway's suspicions were sparked by Dino's words, which led him to assume that Dino was still suspicious. Among the 7 angels of origin, Dino had the best intuition. Dino's intuition was not something that could be ignored. Well, I do suspect that Veldanava-sama has already been resurrected. In fact, Ivalage's appearance is that of Lady Lucia. If the holy relics were stolen, it wouldn't be strange if they took on the appearance of Lord Veldanava. Pico and Gracia were not convinced by Dino's explanation. But if they both swallowed it, then the probability is 50-50, right? That's right. The evidence is weak enough to be definitive. That's how they express negative opinions. In the first place, it was up to Ivalage whether or not she would imitate her appearance when she was alive, and even though she has now been confirmed to be in Lucia's form, there is no guarantee that this will be the end of it. There is still a good chance that she will change into Veldanava's form from here on out. The two of them had a very reasonable idea. Dino had no proof, so he kept quiet. Yeah, I guess. I had no choice but to respond in that way. The truth is, I hoped it would be wrong. That's why I turned a blind eye to those doubts all the more. Feldway felt similarly to Dino. If everything you have done up until now and your true, heartfelt wishes are all in vain if they are reality. For Feldway, this is a truth he does not want to acknowledge. That's not good, Feldway thought. Why did I feel this way? If that's what God wants, shouldn't I blindly obey it? That is exactly what a vassal should be like. This is Feldway's idea of the ideal master-servant relationship. But however, if that is the case, then it would mean that the God Feldway loved no longer exists. Anywhere. Ah, I see, that's what it was. I had hoped for the resurrection of the one I loved. Feldway finally realized his mistake. He was trapped in his delusions, misjudged his true desires, and continued to act recklessly. An existence that loved and respected all the life forms he had created, and recognized their free will and diversity. That was the Veldanava that Feldway admired. They are definitely not like those who simply stand by and watch without stopping. Those who wish for the destruction of the world. If that was the case, then even if Veldanava had been resurrected at this point, he could confidently say that he was not the creator Feldway had been waiting for. Dino, even if Lord Veldanava had been resurrected, you still have no intention of obediently following him, do you? HMPH, that's hypothetical. Well, you're right, but it seems like you've gotten over it. I won't deny it. Feldway was aware of his own naivety, but even so, if asked if he could draw his bow against Veldanava, it was difficult for him to give an immediate answer. The first thing to do is to assess the situation. This time, instead of acting on assumptions, he should have been thoughtful and considered the reasons behind the other person's actions. Forcing or imposing your own ideas on others is the biggest obstacle to smooth communication. Only when you are aware of this can you begin to respect others. Feldway finally came to the basic idea. Although he had yet to apologize, Feldway was thinking of making peace with Dino and the others. Dino said that Feldway had betrayed them first. Now Feldway understands that those words are true. At the very least, taking away Dino and the others' free will was a grave sin that could not be forgiven, no matter how one tried to make excuses. It is precisely because they understand this, that they do not apologize. Even if you try to explain it in simple words, it will not be a true apology. First of all, Feldway's attitude and future actions would be crucial in winning the trust of Dino and the others. On that basis, I hope you will accept me as a friend again. That's what I hope. Once that was decided, it was time to act rather than worry. Feldway is responsible for inviting the Destruction Death World Dragon Ryu Ivalage into the base world. Leaving the task of rescuing Milim to others, it was Feldway's job to defeat Ivalage. I'm going to use Ivalage now. That's a problem. Suddenly, a shining being appeared there. Although his appearance was identical to Feldway's, his complexion was different. But more than that, there was a huge difference in his aura and presence. It's like the real thing and the fake. He emitted an overwhelming hacky aura that overwhelmed the space and distorted even light. There was no need to worry. The true identity of that being was none other than the very Veldanava they had just been talking about. Lord Veldanava. Feldway hurriedly gave a huge salute in the air. On the ground, one would kneel, but in the air, the proper bow is to stand still with one's back straight, bow one's head slightly, and place one's right hand over one's heart and one's left hand over one's sacrum. It has been a custom since the time of the 7 primordial angels to line up with the same angle of wings. Dino, Pico, and Gracia also reacted immediately, just like they did back then. They lined up next to Feldway and bowed in a line. There was no need to doubt whether it was genuine or not. That presence, the glow of his soul, was unmistakably the same as that of Stellar King Dragon Veldanava. Now, the creator god has returned. Feldway was confused. Even though it was the long-awaited resurrection of the Lord, there seemed to be little joy welling up in their hearts. The reason for this was a single word from Veldanava. Let's leave the Ivarage free like this. That way we won't have to go through the trouble of selecting them. Selection, Veldanava announced. This means one thing, the purification of this fundamental world. This meant carefully selecting only those who conform to God's will and destroying everyone else. That's exactly what Feldway was trying to do. Still, Feldway's mood remained stagnant. Rather than feeling happy, I feel a surge of sadness. No, that's not true. I just wanted you to stop my foolish actions. Now I understand. Feldway realized how foolish he had been, that he had been a whining child. Ignoring the wishes of his friends, he believed he was the only one who was sad. As a result, he becomes selfish and out of control. Even the words of his friends' advice did not resonate with Feldway. Thinking about it calmly, it was good that he stopped before destroying the world. Milim, who had been out of control, had returned to her senses before causing any fatal damage. If she did it now, the worst possible outcome could have been prevented. Of course, Feldway's crimes will never be forgiven, but that's a story for later. Feldway thought that he could return the world to normal and then face a proper trial, and he was willing to risk his own life to atone for the mistakes he had made. However, Veldanava intended to destroy the world. That's why he had left it too. Feldway and gone into hiding until now. Then I will. Feldway had mixed emotions in his heart. Since he was able to act according to Veldanava's wishes, he should be proud of it. That's what he should think, but he couldn't get the thought out of his head that it wasn't right, because that was Feldway's true feelings. And the bigger problem was what to do next. The reason for the existence of the 7 angels of origin is to work for their master, so they should obey Veldanava, even though that was the correct answer. Emotionally, he couldn't accept it. Feldway was confused by his own situation. That's why we were late. Dino made the proposal before Feldway. Thank you for your kind words, but I am against it. The world is not so bad that it needs to be destroyed. In fact, I think it is more stable than ever, even when viewed from the perspective of its long history. I think we should quickly eliminate the evil age and restore peace to the world. Hearing this, Veldanava looked puzzled. Are you going to defy me? He tilted his head, as if to say, I don't understand why Dino said something like that. Veldanava let out a sigh. My goodness, are you also with Velzard? She also opposed me, but I didn't. Forgive her. I really wanted to take someone to the next world, so I listened to her. Selfish wish. I promised to only take those she froze. This was the moment when Velzard's reason for doing so became clear. Feldway realized that everything, including his own purpose, had gone according to Veldanava's plan. I wonder how far into the future this prediction can see. Feldway can only shudder. And Dino was completely hit by the intimidating force emanating from Veldanava and was unable to move a muscle. Veldanava wasn't particularly angry. However, he just stares at his pawns, which don't move as he wishes, as if to say, is something broken? That's why it seems all the more frightening. You were the first tools I created, so I thought I'd take you with me. Run. Before Veldanava could finish speaking, Feldway took action. However, it was one step too late. Just before Feldway pushed Dino away, a flash of light pierced Dino's chest. Dino. Hey, pull yourself together. Pico and Gracia received Dino as if to protect him. Feldway shouted at the two of them. Take Dino and run. It seems that it was back when he was the leader of the 7 angels of the beginning. I get it. Gracia responded immediately. Don't push yourself too hard, Feldway. Pico also showed an honest reaction for the first time in a long time. The 3 then fled towards the ground. After seeing them Veldanava turned to Feldway. You're going against me too. No, my loyalty remains yours, however, if I feel you are wrong, it is my duty as a subordinate to advise you. I will exercise that duty and stop you. Feldway was prepared. Now that he had realized that blind obedience is evil, he decided that it was his turn, just as Obra and Zalerio had done, and as Dino and the others had advised him. He was defeated by Diablo and is still injured. It would be difficult to even buy a little time, let alone discuss whether they could win or not. But still, there's no other way. The current Veldanava was clearly different from before. But the power is real. That soul was pure and beautiful, without any impurity. Yet I didn't feel any love. God was broken. When he lost his beloved Lucia, his heart suffered serious damage. Even though that soul was perfectly recreated, it had forgotten love. As a result, he returned to this world as a completely different person. Tears spilled from Feldway's eyes. He couldn't just leave his master like he was, lost in the same maze of his own heart, no, even deeper than he was. I didn't want the Lord to regret it. I will surpass my parents and save you. I will definitely. Emma. Feldway swears. And then he challenged his beloved master. Chapter 3. The Chaos of the Evil God. The war situation is coming to a climax. Everyone felt that way. If I thought about rescuing Milim, my worries would be in vain. Ivalage tossed Milim aside. Everyone realized that there was no intention to deliver the final blow. There's no doubt that he is pure evil, but Ivalage's power is immense. He is so strong that even Milim doesn't feel that he is a threat. That's bad. To be honest, it's beyond our control. That was Benimaru's impression. Of course, this wasn't a telepathic transmission, but rather an unintentional complaint. Therefore, the only people who heard this were those nearby. It was an ironclad rule not to make the warriors feel despair, so he was careful not to let anyone hear him. But even so, his true feelings spilled out, but there was nothing he could do about it. Everyone present had the same thoughts in their hearts. Moreover, the plan we had so carefully devised was ruined. He should have been happy that Milim had been rescued successfully, but instead, the fact that no one seemed to care about him weighed heavily on him. Karian and the others were prepared to risk their lives, but they had something on their mind as they helped Milim up. The reality is that their desperate feelings are no big deal to Ivalage. In order to accept this, they are allowed to complain a little. Well, Milim is safe. Let's be happy about that. Karian spoke positively. Frey nodded in response, giving a comforting response. That's right. He seems conscious and doesn't have any serious injuries. If he's just exhausted, he'll be back to normal with some rest. Unless they defeat Ivalage, they won't be able to rest easy, even though they knew this, they had no choice but to speak cheerfully. If I thought about it deeply, I felt like I was going to give up before the fight even. Bay,